everybody, welcome to Kindred Skulls. My name is Matt Fries. I'm here with my co-host Nick Olson. We're recording a bit late for Greg this week, so he was unable to make it this time, but he will continue to be back in future episodes coming up here. Nick, how you doing tonight?
Doing great. We got Vikings preseason game in the books. We got another one on the coming up on the horizon. We got actual football being played, and we had joint practices, all the drama with that. So it's actually a pretty exciting time. I feel like we're getting into football season, so that's fun. How you doing?
Yeah, I feel like joint practices really are the most fun part of the preseason. Like the preseason games, at least, because we've got this new team, this new offense and everything. We're not really going to see a lot from the ones in the preseason games, right? We got to see the first team offensive line out there, and a number of first teamers, but so many of our stars sat where like the joint practices, you kind of get more good on good, right? With your opponents, and I think that's kind of cool. So it's been cool to see the clips coming out of the 49ers joint practice recently. But we should probably go back first and start off with that preseason game. Obviously, that's what everybody probably wants us to talk about here. So, we ended up losing. I guess technically that's the first loss of the Kevin O'Connell era. That don't care about preseason wins and losses. Like maybe if you're the Ravens, you care about preseason wins and losses, and that's done pretty well for them recently. But like ultimately, Kirk Cousins isn't playing. Our starters aren't playing, right? Justin Jefferson wasn't playing. So it's not really a good representation of what you're going to see in the regular season from the team, at least from a personnel standpoint, right? So at that point, we don't really care. But we can talk a lot about the individual players and their performances. In terms of the good performances, Nick, who do you want to talk about first?
I would say the number one standout to me was Ed Ingram. I mean, personal issues aside with him, he was really, really impressive to me in pretty much every facet of the game. I thought he was very impressive in pass protection. Granted, the Raiders don't have the best defensive tackles or interior defensive linemen he was going up against, but still, to have a pretty much clean pass sheet throughout the game. They did. Pro Football Focus did credit him with one QB hit he gave up to Mond, which I can kind of see. Somebody was able to get outside of it. It was one of those Mond dropbacks where he's holding the ball for pretty long.
It was technically a QB hit because the defensive player hit the quarterback, and I guess you have to assign that to the person who lost in pass protection. But Mond took like 4 hitches in that rep, so it's like I don't know.
Technically a loss. Technically, you'd want Ingram to do better, but like nothing that would concern me. So his pass protection was very stout. Obviously, you saw the very tight grip strength. You saw the very stout anchor. It's fun watching Ed Ingram because like on most dropbacks, he likes to jump set. He likes to attack, and 2, like he just doesn't give any ground. So like you'll watch him, and like everybody else on the offensive line will be like 2 yards back, and Ed Ingram will still be up with his man, locking him down near the line of scrimmage. So it's fun to have, and he's so active in pass protection. He also like really looks for help. There's a great clip of him helping his right tackle Blake Brandell out, who also had a good game himself. But he wound up not having an assignment, immediately turned and like decked the guy to his side of him. So really impressive in pass protection, active. Kind of saw a lot of the things that we wanted to see out of him translate from his college tape. In the run game, I had some big questions. How's he going to fit into this offense that primarily, wants to base the scheme out of a stretch zone, wide zone, mid zone kind of play? And we didn't necessarily see him like reaching nose tackles like a few techniques over or anything, but there were a lot of combo blocks where he and Blake Brandell like cleared a lot of space. Schlottman too, both guys on either side of him were clearing holes in the run game. He was climbing really effectively to the second level. He did miss. Linebackers or other second level defenders were kind of able to swat his hands away or make him miss on 2 or 3 occasions, I think.
Yep.
His actually aiming and making good contact at the second level, maybe something needs to work on. But the fact that he was able to climb, has the athleticism, move up there, that wasn't necessarily something we got to see a lot of at LSU. So I thought that was really encouraging. And meanwhile, Jesse Davis was really unimpressive. Wasn't in there very long, but gave up a lot of pressure in a short amount of time, and did not really have any run block wins in his short amount of time up there. I think Jesse Davis was the lowest graded player on offense. Ed Ingram was the second highest graded rookie offensive lineman out of 80 plus guys out there last week. So to the extent you care about PFF grades, which maybe they don't matter as much, especially with preseason matchups and smaller sample sizes. But still, I think pretty much everyone who looked at his tape really was impressed by him. So it looks like now that he's taking all the reps with the ones in camp and in joint practices, it looks like he's running away with the starting job. So that was encouraging to see see him kind of take that next step. So that was the number one guy. Was there anyone else who stood out to you?
Well, just a little bit more on Ingram, right? I think in particular, like you mentioned, the getting up to the second level, he got the linebackers within his frame. It was just they were easily able to kind of dismiss his hands and get around him. So that's something obviously latching onto those guys that he needs to work at. I totally agree with you with the uh, I kind of hate using this phrase because it always reminds me of a certain fourth round pick that we made years ago. But he dents people like a lot, right? So when he jump sets people, he does a really good job of getting that backwards bend in people, which is a valuable skill for offensive linemen to have. It's just like your strength should not be your only attribute as an offensive lineman if you're being a fourth round draft pick. If you don't know who I'm talking about, Google Willie Beavers. Thank you. But
Between him and Darrisaw, it's fun actually having offensive linemen who can move people, who have heavy hands, easy power. They move bodies, so they're fun to watch.
Yeah, so no, that was really impressive. I also want to say, just in general, a positive for me is the wide receiver play, and I think this is kind of intertwined with a lot of things that went on. But Adam Thielen didn't play, Justin Jefferson didn't play. KJ Osborne played very sparingly. I think he only played the first couple of drives, if he played at all. I don't remember too much from him, but pretty much all of our depth wide receivers made a big play during the game. I don't know if BC had one, but he was open a couple of times where he was missed by the quarterback who was in. Obviously, Amir Smith-Marset had a couple of nice catches. Albert Wilson had the 2 touchdowns. And Tyshawn Jackson, I believe, is the other wide receiver who had a couple big catches. And Naylor had a big catch over the middle, too, as well, on a dig route, I think. But I think that interplay of the receivers...
Too. It's a deep group.
Yeah. Yeah, and Chisena had the one corner route that he caught. Yeah, so it was guys were getting open all over the place. And I think there was some quality route running going on, but I also think it speaks to the offensive design that we have in general, right? It was obviously very intentional about how we were getting guys open. And I think the second Albert Wilson touchdown is a very good example of this. I'm kind of stealing this from JT O'Sullivan because he did his review on Mond, which we'll talk about Mond later as well, obviously. But, basically Albert Wilson was the number 3 receiver and he's running a wheel, and the way the routes are designed, it picks him open and gets him free behind the defense. I thought Wilson did a good job on the route, but and there were other things there was this Amir Smith-Marset crosser that he was running. I think it was third down. It was also in the red zone where you could see the design of the routes pulled everybody out of the play. You had 3 guys from the right crossing to the left. That pulled that, and there was also a wheel route from the running back, so it pulled the linebacker out of the picture as well. The design was very clearly intended to get guys open, and it was thoughtful about how it gets guys open. And that's kind of the hallmark of the McVay offense, more so than running, the zone bootlegs or something like that. It's understanding how routes work together and how routes affect certain coverages. And I think that was probably the missing piece for, the Clint Kubiak offense, for example, right? The interplay of how your routes are affecting the coverages that are being called against you is kind of where the NFL is at in terms of the cutting edge of designing offenses. And I think, at least in the preseason, right, and I will say the Raiders secondary, I think, did a terrible job. They were blitzing a ton, but any play action, those linebackers were basically in the backfield. So there was always a ton of space over the middle. I'd be interested to see how it will work against a real NFL defense, right? Because this is backups and stuff. So you're not going to get the best version of what's happening. But, At least it was very promising early on from the offensive design perspective to me.
Yeah, totally agree. A couple other ones that, don't need to belabor it too much, but a couple other ones that really stood out to me were both starting interior defensive linemen. I think Harrison Phillips was maybe the best player on the field. Wasn't in there for too many snaps, but just a dominant force against the run, took on double teams without shedding any ground, but was able to split them and make plays in the backfield. And was also really impressive as a pass protector. He had a cleanup sack after somebody else created a pressure.
I think it was Alvin Tomlinson.
Yeah, it was Tomlinson. Yeah, so Tomlinson himself, I thought looked really good. I think he fits better as like a, even though he's like 325 pounds, which is more nose tackle-y. He kind of has the movement and pass rush skill set of somebody who's more of a 3-4 defensive end a little bit. So I think he fits in a little bit better there. And we saw him able to take on guards one-on-one in pass protection when they were able to scheme that up for him. So I thought Tomlinson looked good, and then Phillips looked really great too. So I thought that was really encouraging because we kind of know Daniil Hunter and Zadarius Smith are a very good edge duo. If they're both healthy, that's probably the third best edge duo in the league, I would say. But it's the interior defensive lineman with the new scheme that I have more questions about. But if those are your four guys on downs where we're playing four guys, that's a really stout starting four on the defensive line. So I was really encouraged to see that. And then we can't talk about this game without talking about how good Ty Chandler and Kene Nwangwu looked. Both of them looked phenomenal. Good vision from both of them. I mean, it helps that the second team offensive line was creating a lot of holes for them, but they were able to capitalize on those holes. Ty Chandler in particular was shedding a lot of tackles, creating a lot of extra yards after contact. They both looked very explosive, but they both exhibited a good amount of patience. Ty Chandler showed a little bit more power, or Kene Nwangwu showed a little bit more power than I'm used to seeing with him. Wasn't always like I kind of think of Kene Nwangwu still learning how to run the running back position and still going full throttle all the time, but that wasn't what he looked like in the preseason game, and he also contributed in the passing game as well. So I was really encouraging to see for a team that Dalvin Cook is getting expensive. Alexander Madison's a free agent next year. It's nice to see that they have this stable of backs who might be able to contribute going forward. So that was good to see too.
Yeah, and they were very clearly explosive, bursty options in the run game too, right? Like that's what you'd expect from those two guys based on their physical profiles. But it's nice to see kind of that explosion and that, like unfortunately, Alex Madison doesn't have that level of explosiveness that they look like Dalvin Cook in terms of their burst and ability to hit the hole. And that run to the edge from Chandler was really nice, just his ability to beat the defense and the linebackers to the edge, and then honestly make a secondary move to get a few more yards on the end of that play. Like that is so one thing I did notice with Chandler, and this is a very minor critique, so don't take it too bad, but there was one play where he jump cut like 3 times in a row, and it kind of wasted space and movement. I don't think that's a consistent aspect of his game, but it is something I'd like to see cleaned up. But even with that said, like he gained like 8 yards on that play, so that's a really nitpicky comment for me to make, right? So it's like he was able to find holes, and even if he's slowing himself down, he still has the agility and the burst to get into that hole and make that play. So I think that's really promising to see from him. And honestly, it speaks to, I think when we did our roster projections, like I kept all of the running backs on the roster. I kept all 4 running backs on the roster. I think that's a legit possibility to keep 4 running backs and CJ Ham.
Yeah, and you know what? I was kind of hesitant to do that. I've been hesitant to do that in all my, articles of 53-man roster projections and things we've talked about on this show. But now that I see it in action, and I see how often we're motioning, this is one thing we saw from the offense. We're motioning running backs outside. Running backs are running a lot of routes, and they're getting involved in the passing game.
Yep.
We're creating mismatches when we line them up in the slot or even out wide. So they're not just guys to take hands off from the backfield. They have that versatility in them, and we saw that a little bit in this preseason game. We're seeing it in camp, so that makes me buy a little bit more into keeping 5 backs on the final 53. So I think it makes sense. Not to mention, they're probably all 5 of them are probably some of the top 53 players on the roster. So it would make sense. So if those are the positives, the main positives we're taking away from the game, what did you think were the negatives of the game? And let's start with the quarterbacks because I think Mannion, obviously, I mean, Mon put up points, but I think both had some pretty ugly lowlights. I'm curious for you, coming out of this game, who's your QB2 going forward?
QB2 going forward, it's a really interesting question to me because I think just from an individual upside perspective, the answer should be Kellen Mond. I wonder how NFL minds feel about this because like Kellen Mond, despite his really impressive final drive that he ran, and he had a number of throws and showed a little bit of playmaking ability throughout the game, right? The problem is his process was really, really slow. Like consistently slow, even on the nice plays. And honestly, watching it, like there is clearly a difference between the way Sean Mannion processes the game and the way Kellen Mond processes the game. And that's like Sean Mannion is not a good quarterback, right? But he's getting the ball to the location it should probably go relatively on time. He's not particularly accurate. He's not, he's not a guy who's going to light the world on fire. And we saw him in the Green Bay game last year, right? Like, I don't have a whole lot of hope if Sean Mannion's the starting quarterback. But he understands at least what he's seeing in front of him and the answers to those questions. Mond, it's taking a little bit of time to get there. And again, I'll go back to shouting out that JT O'Sullivan video on Kellen Mond. You can find it on his YouTube channel, the QB School. But like he talks about this in a couple plays in a row where Mond's processing is slow and he misses open receivers ultimately on the play. Now later on, he was able to make the throws, but he still has to see the receivers come open before he's making the throws, and that's not a way you can survive on a week-to-week basis in the NFL. Basically what Mon needs right now is to have his receivers clearly win their routes, see it and be able to throw it in that timeline. He does have a good arm, so like he can get away with throwing the ball a little bit late, right? Like he's got good velocity on his throws. I mean, you can get the ball there into tight windows. He's a pretty accurate player, but just the processing aspect of the game still needs work, which is not to say that can't be sped up. It can be sped up for players. It's just something that he needs to, he clearly needs to do a better job at. He's clearly not there yet.
Yeah, I would agree. It's tough. I don't think either are like very worthy of an NFL roster spot. Mond obviously was able to drive the ball down the field, and he had some really nice throws. And the ones he had in rhythm were impressive. One of the touchdown throws was like that nice slant route perfectly in rhythm right at the top of his drop. That's what you kind of like to see, but it stood out and was so great because so many of his throws, he was just hitching back there all day, taking forever to read the defenses. And in his defense, Patrick Graham's the defensive coordinator in Las Vegas, known for throwing a lot of stuff at you, and he was throwing a lot of crazy looks out there. There were inverted coverages. There were lots of funky fronts, so he wasn't, holding back his bag of tricks just for the preseason. So in his defense, that was a little tricky to read, but at the same time, he was missing wide open receivers that were in his progression that he looked directly at and declined, and it's just like, what are you doing out there, buddy? So despite the fact that, he was able to ultimately move the ball down the field a little bit better, was able to put up points in a way that Mannion wasn't. I don't actually think this would work if it weren't up against third stringers. Part of the problem is his average time to throw was over 3.5 seconds, which is, that's over a second longer than the average is in an actual NFL game. The actual NFL average is 2.5. So he's holding it on for, almost twice as long as the average NFL quarterback does. With our offensive, shaky offensive line at times, that's not gonna pan out. Maybe it works if you're Russell Wilson holding onto the ball and making things happen. Or if you're Deshaun Watson, out of pressure, but that's not really Kellen Mond. He's not like the slipperiest player. He's athletic, but that's not like his calling card. So,
and to be clear, he had that play in the red zone where he was able to get away, and he wasn't able to find open receivers on that play, right? He ended up trying to throw back across his body when Amir Smith-Marset was literally doing jumping jacks in the back of the end zone because he was open. Like, there were bodies in between, and it wouldn't have been the easiest thing in the world, but, like, he needed to find Amir Smith-Marset in that play.
Yeah, and I'll say, watching Mannion, he's like a very neutered Kirk Cousins, like Kirk Cousins with a noodle arm. Like he can actually, I trust that he's seeing things generally well. There was that one example where he didn't seem to see the linebacker, or maybe he thought he could float the ball over them, and it went through the linebacker's arms. Should have been an interception, I think. But I mean, Mond was throwing that throw that Mond made to Chisena on the comeback route probably should have been an interception too. So they both had ugly plays. I think Mond gives you a little more upside because he can fit those sort of cover two honey hole throws. With that Mannion, I don't know if he really has the arm for that anymore. But Mannion actually can process a defense respectably quickly, or at least know when to get rid of the ball a little bit. In fact, that's probably a problem with Mannion is he wants to get rid of the ball very quickly
Yeah.
because he kind of breaks down under pressure a little bit. So I don't know if they went. I think a lot of fans are going to watch that preseason game and be like pulling their hair out that like Kellen Mond is still with the third team right now as we go through like joint practices and everything. But I completely understand it seeing what Mannion is doing in game because when it actually comes to like running out an NFL offense against first team defenses, what Mannion did probably translates a little bit better. Even if Mond, his highlights are really nice, but his lowlights are going to stand out. There's going to be a lot of sacks. There's going to be a lot more interceptions. There's going to be strip sacks, and there's just going to be ugly plays too. On top of him having the occasional, like dime. So I'm not sure that trade off is worth it.
So I will say what I think might be best for Mond as a player, like just for his progression. Like if Kirk Cousins tears his ACL in 2 weeks, right? And we're just screwed for this season because we don't have access to a quarterback. And we don't want to trade for Jimmy Garoppolo because honestly that's like a waste of assets to try to do that. And we don't have the money to do that. I'm pretty sure. I don't know what the salary cap implications of that are. But it might help Mond to play for a couple weeks, then sit on the bench and have time to digest what he's done. Like people have talked about this with what Davis Mills did last year, where he like played for a couple weeks, then I think he got injured and was out for a few more weeks, and then he looked like a markedly better player after that. I think that might be what Mond needs, so he can see the bullets flying at him, right? And end up with those struggles because I think he's going to throw picks and he's going to take sacks and that sort of thing. But understand, get a taste of what it's like and understand that his process does need to speed up, and that might help him, reach those goals. I don't know if it does, right? Like he's a raw player still. I would term him as a raw player based on how he's played in the preseason, right? But he gives you hope, at least in some respects, due to his arm talent and his physical gifts.
Yeah, and I do think he's progressed compared to last year. Like the footwork looks a lot cleaner. He's the moments where it comes together. It's you didn't see that really a lot last year in the preseason in the limited reps that we saw from him. So I feel like he's making incremental progress. Hopefully, he can just keep that trajectory up. Right now, I'm not sure he's an NFL caliber backup, but I'm confident Mannion isn't. So I'm not really happy either way. Maybe they'll find a quarterback after roster cuts.
Yeah, and he has been willing to throw the ball down the field, which is great. Like it was something that he did not do all that often in college, actually. So it's great to see that he's willing to take those shots. But let's roll it on to the next one. We spent a lot of time on people we hope don't play this season, honestly.
Any other lowlights you want to cover? Any other guys?
The ones that do we want to talk about Jesse Davis?
I mean, he was bad. It was only a few reps, but he was bad. He continues to be bad. He's the backup now, so maybe we don't need to belabor the point. I was really disappointed with the linebacker group in general, other than maybe Jordan Hicks. I think Troy Dye, you see the range, and I think some of the things they like that has him running with the second team. But he just made so many mistakes in coverage. In run defense, he was fitting the wrong gaps. He was all over the place. He was missing tackles or not able to make tackles that were his gap assignment. He had a really rough game, and then the guys behind him, I think, were even worse. Chaz Surratt looks like he doesn't belong on an NFL field. So, the depth there is pretty concerning. Asamoah, I think, had some really flashy plays. I think we all remember seeing that brilliant tackle for loss outside the numbers, but he also
just
had
like Baylor. Just like his game against Baylor,
There were some coverage breakdowns that I think I'm probably more inclined to put on the rookie as opposed to like Jordan Hicks or whoever else was opposite him. There were some he's a little overeager in the running game and would shoot the wrong gap. I like the tools, but he's not there yet. So, and that was probably like the best of the other line. So it was all pretty rough. So I don't know. I'm not pretty happy with that group either. So
yeah. So I guess that kind of wraps it up. Like I personally, I just feel like, and we talked about this a little bit last week, but depth in general is a problem for this team. Once you get past the first team guys, which we've kind of sung the praises of the first team guys, outside of maybe wide receiver, I don't feel great about the depth of anybody on this team. Actually, I'll shout out Josh Metellus played pretty well at safety. I don't know if he's ever going to get snaps at safety given the three guys we have ahead of him, but he played pretty well there. But it's just going to be problematic if injuries start to pile up and these guys have to start to see the field again. Is what I'll say with that.
All right. Now that we've talked about individual players, let's dive into the tape talk. We're bringing it back. It's preseason tape talk, grinding the all 22 for our loyal listeners and watchers. So, one thing I wanted to talk about defensively was we really saw an emphasis in the pass rush from Donatel and the pass rush team there that they really like stunts, and they worked a lot of stunts. There were 15. I went back and charted out every snap, and I think there were 15 passing downs. Which would include everything 3rd and 6 or higher, so 3rd and 6, 3rd and 7. That does include that 3rd and 24 we had. And so those passing downs or 4th downs if they went for it, and then everything in the 2-minute drill, which includes all the plays that they had in that final end of the first half where they had that drive there. And they ran stunts from the pass rush on about 2/3. 10 of those 15 reps involved a stunt. And for listeners who may not know or need the refresher, or where would it be helpful to have the refresher? A stunt is just any time where your defensive linemen move around so that one attacks a different gap than where they're immediately set up right at. So a lot of times, most common version is like a tech stunt or a tackle end stunt, where the tackle will loop around as the end will crash inside, and so maybe the defensive end or the outside linebacker will try and crash inside and penetrate the interior of the defensive line, while the defensive tackle or in 3-4 defensive end will loop around, try to get pressure from the outside. And the reason you don't do it on non-passing downs, or at least you don't do it as much on non-passing downs, is it's a good way to destroy your run fits and have guys gash you in the run game. So you don't really want to do it on 1st and 10 or short down situations, but it is really difficult for pass protectors to take on and to pass off those responsibilities really quickly. And Pro Football Focus, Eric Eager had a good article on this where he showed over the last 5 years on plays where teams use stunts, the pressure percentage goes up from about 32% to 42% over the last 10 years. And the sack percentage goes up by about 2.3% compared to plays where they don't run stunts. So they're just effective. And, I think seeing it work with Patrick Jones and James Lynch makes me really encouraged to think about what it might be when it's Armon Watts and Daniil Hunter and Zadarius Smith spinning inside. So I'm pretty excited to see how that works. And it worked really well in the Raiders game. I think we saw pressure on over 2/3 of those stunts, and they got home on 3 sacks on just those 10 pressure plays. So it was really impressive stuff. Really encouraging to see. Schematically, it's something that I hope will translate into the regular season with the first team as well. So because it's been proven, as talked about, the increase in pressure percentage, decrease in EPA per play allowed. So it benefits the defense generally. Would be great if we continue to see that into the regular season, not only because for the NFL generally I think it works, but also I think specifically for when you got Daniil Hunter's athleticism, when you got Zadarius Smith, who's so effective attacking, especially from the inside, and being moved around as a chess piece. I think it's really exciting to think about how effective that could be with our starters too. So that was one thing that stood out to me. Was there anything you caught on tape?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll just add a couple things to the stunts there. One, it's been a Fangio staple, right? This is something we probably expected going into this, so it's no surprise, but it's really nice to see how effective they've been so far. And then two, it's most useful not only because of the you can screw up the run fits, although you can do things with the linebackers to fix that probably, but on 3rd downs, typically the quarterback needs to hold onto the ball a little bit more, and stunts develop slightly slower than a straight up pass rush. So, at the end of the day, there are a couple of downsides to them, but it's a great way to get pressure on the quarterback in situations where the offense is going to pass. And the fact that we ran, you said 15 of them is kind of crazy, and definitely a change from Zimmer, who in his own right, is fantastic at designing third down pressure packages, right? Not to take away from him, but it'll be a different look on defense this year on third down. Hopefully, just as effective in terms of getting to the quarterback. So I think flipping over to the offensive end, I kind of spoiled this a little bit, but just the offensive play design in general, like I mentioned, was so intentional to getting guys open. I talked about the uh, I want to call it just like it wasn't quite mesh, but it was kind of four verticals with an underneath rail. So the Vikings ran. It was Amir Smith Marset on the left side running a drag route across the middle, and then they had two players on the other side run vertical post routes, right, which pulls the coverage players. And the Raiders were running man coverage, so everybody was running with their man. Obviously, routes across the formation against man coverage are great anyway, but you clear everything out the middle because you also have a running back wheel route. So Amir Smith-Marset is running right over the middle of the field. One of the things you're concerned about is a linebacker being able to cut that route off. You clear out the linebacker using those other routes, and that is just a very intentional design. I thought we did a good job, which we did this last year, but using motion as a man zone indicator. And then also using, and this is something we did early in the game, using tight end, or I think maybe we did it with Longwu once, where it was a nub set. I think it was Johnny Munt the whole time. I just saw a 6 at the end because he's 86. But using tight end nubs, so it was 3 receivers to the left side and a single tight end split out wide to the right. I can't remember us running a whole lot of that last year. Granted, we didn't have, Tyler Conklin was all right, but we didn't have a stud tight end last year. But Kevin O'Connell is willing to do it with Johnny Munt in the preseason. So I think that might give us more hope. And that's something that the Chiefs do all the time, right? In terms of getting those matchups with wide receivers on the 3-player side. And then hopefully you have a wide receiver that can win matchups on the single side. I don't think, again, that Munt is going to be that player, but hopefully when Irv Smith comes back, like that's kind of the profile that you hope Irv Smith can be, right? A guy who is big and a tight end, but can win in single coverage, right? Win one-on-one against defensive backs even. Like you hope he has that speed and the quickness to do that.
Yeah, it was encouraging to see kind of. It was actually the first time we saw Kevin O'Connell's offense out there, really, in terms of live reps. So for me, I thought it looked a lot like a McVay offense, and obviously maybe that's to be taken for, but like a classic McVay offense, not the Matthew Stafford offense, but like the 2019 offense where there's a lot of play action dropbacks trying to get explosives. There's a lot of variance on wide zone, not like straight up wide zone necessarily, but like split zone and sort of different little variants, plus a mix of like duo inside zone in there as like a change up. There was in terms of formations, we saw a lot of wide receivers on the field, a lot of wide receivers getting a lot of snaps. This is a fair amount of tight ends. We did not see very much of the fullbacks, which I was actually surprised. I think Ham was in there for 1 snap. And Vargas, who's no longer on the team, they just cut him down as they went down to 85. Another surprise to me, maybe another signal that they're not going to be as reliant on 21 personnel and fullback usage as we might have thought. Maybe not, though. Tough to say. With that is, maybe we're not going to see as much fullback usage in this offense. Maybe it's going to look a little bit more like the Jared Goff Rams offense is a little. But I don't think that's entirely true because talking to Luke Braun, and he said like there was an entire day where they just drilled lead stuff, so like fullback stuff all day. So it sounds like they do have a plan in store for CJ Ham. I also think schematically, fullbacks do so many things. Like if you have a fullback, like if you can take McVay's offense and add a fullback, even if he's not Kyle Juszczyk, it just does so much for your run game. You can insert a gap anywhere. It's like you can run power, but with zone, however you want to do it, and then you can exploit matchups.
Honestly, for fullback, I think the answer is they just didn't like Jake Vargas as a player, which is what led to him getting cut. Unfortunately for him, but CJ Ham being in very early in the game and getting very limited snaps tells me he's a 1, and they're not trying to figure out what to do with him. Like they have a plan for him, I think.
The other thing I'll say is McVay is famous for like running the most vanilla, boring offense of that he can, and in the preseason, and like not giving away any of his tricks, and then taking it to 100 as soon as the regular season starts. So it might have been that element of it too. Like, Kevin O'Connell doesn't want to give away any of his state secrets as regards, his fullback usage, or and a lot of the stuff he was doing was kind of just basic McVay staples anyway. So there was some creative play designs, but a lot of it was just like, oh yeah, that's mesh. Oh yeah, that's they're bow or whatever. That's their other variants on all the other plays. So probably kept it a little bit vanilla too. So
well, based on how he's treated training camp, Kevin O'Connell clearly does not want to give away any state secrets. So
yeah, not till the regular season. Okay, that's it for Tape Talk. We had joint practices this week with the 49ers, 2 days back to back, Wednesday, Thursday of joint practices with the San Francisco 49ers. It's a good test, I think. It's another playoff hopeful in the NFC. I think they are favored to be at least a wild card team. And they're in a tough division, so I don't know if they're favored to run away with the division. Exciting team with Trey Lance now taking over as the starter. They've got some real blue chip talent to test our best players against. Trent Williams, probably the best offensive lineman in the game right now. Deebo Samuel, first team All-Pro last year. Brandon Ayuk take a big step forward this year. Nick Bosa, obviously, in the conversation for best defensive lineman, even defensive player of the year. So
every
a lot of guys,
member of their defensive line, honestly.
Yeah, everybody there, but Nick Bosa obviously the standout. So being able to see what the Vikings look like against other teams. Some of the questions we're having is like, is Zadarius Smith kind of dropping off, or is it Christian Darrisaw taking a leap forward? I think we've got some of those questions answered a little bit. The first day of practice, Zadarius Smith, well, I think I saw reports both days of practice. Zadarius Smith was one of the standout players on defense. So that was really encouraging to see, including beating Trent Williams for a sack on the first day, getting in some really quality reps there. So anytime you can beat Trent Williams for a sack, that's a blue chip player. So that's obviously really encouraging to see, especially after we've heard reports that Zadarius Smith wasn't as impressive as we would have hoped early in camp. So that was good to see. Darrisaw, it sounded like they held the 49ers defense. They held their own against the 49ers defensive line the first day. And then on Thursday, things were just a bit of a mess. Nick Bosa got into the backfield. Depending on how homer of the 49ers reporters you're following, there's somewhere between like 1 and 6 sacks during 11 on 11s. So
yeah, I saw a video of Nick Bosa getting 2 legitimate sacks in a row. So I believe it.
Yeah, so a rough day for the offensive line, and that includes, not just Darrisaw, but Brian O'Neill getting beaten by Nick Bosa, which, testament to how good Nick Bosa is, because Brian O'Neill has given up like 3 sacks in his career. So, but also the interior, 49ers defensive line is just stacked, and that they weren't even playing Eric Armstead, who's, I think, banged up. So just a very good defensive line. So stuff like that is great to see. Also got to see our wide receivers. They've been shredding, Cameron Dantzler and Shannon Sullivan and a little bit of Patrick Peterson in camp, but we don't have a lot of confidence in those cornerbacks. And so we got to go up against the 49ers defensive backs, and they aren't very good either because they held out their top 2 guys.
Correct.
And their safety Ward is hurt too. But Justin Jefferson was still, he looked like the best player on the field. Like, he beating guys every which way, every route. I love to do those "we'll be right back" clips on Twitter, and I felt like there's just an overabundance. It was like I could pick between any of 5 different highlights of Justin Jefferson. So he was embarrassing guys all over the field. And it was also really interesting to see ways that they're getting him the ball, moving Justin Jefferson into the backfield and having him run choice routes. That's like a nasty combination, because one of the things I like generally about Kevin O'Connell's offense is the ability to have man zone options for the receivers. Like, there'll be a lot of crossing routes that'll be like stop in zone, stop in the soft spot in zone, or keep going if it's man. Just ways to like make your routes more effective, and if your wide receivers and quarterbacks are on the same page, it makes things more effective. But also those choice routes, and giving running backs, or if it's Justin Jefferson for the backfield, 2-way goes. And that's just going to make you that much more deadly and impossible to stop.
It's really, really difficult to cover those, and it's even more difficult when you're going up against Justin Jefferson, who is such a crafty route runner that you can't tell which way he's going to go. Alvin Kamara obviously makes a living off of that running back choice route, right? And he's really good at that. But, a lot of times guys will have a tell that gives them away. Justin Jefferson obviously does not have that. That's what's made him so effective for 2 straight seasons in the NFL. And it's great to hear that the training camp reports match what we hope for as a player, right? Obviously, we'll have to wait until the regular season, but like the increased usage and the varied usage of Justin Jefferson was probably your number 2 selling point for Kevin O'Connell after everything he could do to help Kirk Cousins, right? Which obviously using Jefferson in interesting ways is probably a part of that in general. But like I think those are the 2 things you were most looking for, right, when you have this guy in, and it seems like we're doing that.
Yeah. Any other observations from the joint practices you want to take away?
No, honestly,
Obviously,
I didn't get a chance to look too much at them. So
yeah, our offensive line struggled a lot on Thursday, which isn't to be too surprised by considering how good San Francisco's defensive line is. And Nick Bosa not the only one there, so that showed up, I think, in both the passing game and the run game got shut down a lot. Weren't really able to generate much movement in the running game, so. A bit of a sobering reminder amidst all the training camp hype that the offensive line probably is not about to emerge as like a top 10 unit anytime soon. As hopeful as we are for Darisaw taking a leap and making a step forward, and Ed Ingram being an upgrade over the parade of horribles over the last few years. So we'll see how it goes. But yeah, that's one thing. Cousins looked really sharp. I feel like they're unloading a lot of his. A lot of the best weaponry, and Cousins seems to be on the same page with Jefferson and all the other receivers. KJ Osborne, Adam Thielen, all coming up with big plays. I think the rookies are starting to take a little bit of a step forward. I saw a lot of positive praise and good plays from Booth, from Scene. Asamoah got some praise as well. So I think they're all starting to things are starting to click a little bit for the rookies, which is encouraging to see. I think Dantzler has had a really good training camp. And he's continued that in the joint practices, going up and shutting down Brandon Ayuk, some of their receivers. He came away with, I think, multiple pass breakups both days. So that was good to see. Patrick Peterson also. Patrick Peterson did get beat by a long bomb to Danny Gray, who's the star or the,
track star,
sort of late round gem by the 49ers. Very, very fast speedster.
Also a track star, yeah. Late round gem, track star runs like a low 4.3 or something.
Which another reminder that this if this cornerback room is improved, and it won't be too hard for it to be, that's great. But also keep in mind Patrick Peterson's almost 33. Cameron Dantzler ran 4.640. This cornerback room is susceptible to speed. Shannon Sullivan also pretty slow, so you worry a little bit, especially in a quarter system where if they're running vertical routes, you're one-on-one against that guy. It's gonna be they're gonna be susceptible to those go routes. So. I think a lot of positives to take away from these joint practices. And I from the accounts I was watching and reading, which include both reliable Vikings beat writers like, Arif and like, Kellen or Will Ragetz, but also like San Francisco 49ers beat writers. I would say Vikings probably looked like the better team over the 2-day period. Probably a little bit better day one, a little bit more evenly matched on day two. But I would say overall, part of this, I think, is Trey Lance rookie struggles. But I would say overall, the Vikings looked like the better team over the 2 days of practice. But,
and that team that we're going against was in the NFC Championship game last year. So, I mean, the 49ers aren't scrubs in terms of the talent. Now, you mentioned, they're holding their top corners out. That's probably a question mark. And, probably the impact that Fred Warner in the middle of that defense has isn't really able to be seen during training camp practices. So,
yeah.
It's kind of a question. I feel like the running game is pretty much a wash during training camp practices. You probably can't figure out much from just the way the running game's operating because it's such a physical thing, right? It's so, but in terms of the passing, it's really encouraging to see what we've been able to do on offense, especially after we stalled out so many times during the regular season last year.
Yeah, so translating that to the actual game against the 49ers Saturday night, is there anything you're looking out for in particular, you're hoping to see? We still don't really know if the starters will play. If it were Sean McVay, he never plays his starters, but O'Connell did play some of his starters last week. I'm not sure if that's just because it's a new offense, a new install, and they're still learning the ropes. You got to balance that against the risk of injury, which the sports sciencey side of things would say don't do, and we're kind of leading into that stuff with all the load management we're doing. So We'll see if Cousins actually plays this time around. Now that he's going to be active, I'm not sure he will, or any of the other older veterans will. But assuming some of the younger starters, some of the younger ones start, is there anything you're going to be looking out for?
Yeah, I think definitely you want to watch the first team, and if I had to bet, right, if or not bet, I wouldn't bet on this because it's I'd be throwing my money away. But like if I had to guess, right, what would happen? I would say that Cousins and the starters get at least a series or two. I think Cousins would lobby pretty hard to like get on the field and play. That feels like something he would do to me. And also O'Connell might want to see those guys in action and get them a feel for live reps with the new installation of the offense, right? I don't know what McVay did in his first year with the Rams. Obviously, that was like 6 years ago. But I'm pretty sure, it's only been the past 3 or 4 years where he hasn't been at least playing the starters for a couple series in the preseason. And I think once that offense is instilled and once everybody understands what's going on, like it's a lot easier to do that. But here, they're still probably getting their feet under them, so to speak, in that offense. So I'd love to see that and just see more of the Kevin O'Connell offense, right, and what happens. But for me, it's all the rookies. It's particularly Ed Ingram at the right guard battle. It would be on defense, what's Andrew Booth able to do in single coverage? What's Lewis Seen able to do from the safety position? I think your major rookies, and then also your backup quarterbacks, because I don't know, they're just the quarterback is what people love to talk about, right? And I'd like to see more of Kellen Mond. I'd like to see if there's week-to-week progression from what he's seeing, if he's able to take that tape application and maybe try to speed it up a little bit. I don't expect him to be, a super processor or whatever immediately, but I'd like to see at least something there that shows that he recognizes he needs to start to get the ball out faster. And if he does do that, I think he's going to become a solid option as backup quarterback, but he's just not there yet.
Yeah, I had pretty much the same list, and I think when I'm specifically looking up at the matchups against the 49ers, I would love to see, their defensive line versus our offensive line as like a heat check on Ed Ingram, heat check on Darisaw. Are they for real, or is this is this just camp smoke? I would love to see our starting cornerbacks or even our backup cornerbacks against San Francisco's weapons, because they've got a lot of them, and they got Kyle Shanahan directing the bus there, so. If it's Debo and Brandon Ayuk and Juszczyk and Kittle, that's a lot of ammo to go up against. But even if it's the backups, Danny Gray, Juwan Jennings, all those other guys, they're stable of running backs that they always have producing, regardless of which guy it is back there. Against Kyle Shanahan's offensive schemes that exploit a lot of weaknesses in your coverage rules and get matchups against your worst coverage guys. It will be really interesting to see if they can go blow for blow with the 49ers, who have a very good offense and a lot of good players there. So that's kind of what I'm most interested in.
Now that you bring up Shanahan, what I specifically don't want to see in that, like, I might put tape over the screen or something so I don't have to watch them, is the linebackers, the backup linebackers. I don't want to see them in this game. It's not going to end well.
Yeah, Kyle Shanahan probably won't need to dip very deep into his bag of tricks to find ways to make Troy Dye look terrible. So Chasserat and friends did it all on their own without Kyle Shanahan scheming things up against them. So all right, that's about it for us, unless we want to dive into 15 seconds of fantasy in honor of Gregg not being with us right now.
In honor of Gregg not being with us, we'll talk about 15 seconds of fantasy for 15 seconds. I think that clock is ticking off pretty quickly.
Okay, ready to go.
And then I think we're done now. Thank
you. 2. Okay, we did not use our time well. This will be it for us from Kindred Skulls until after the 49ers game. We thank you for following along with us. We are at Kindred Skulls on Twitter. Search for Kindred Skulls on YouTube. I am Nick Olson. You can find me at Nick Olson NFL on Twitter. He is Matt Fries. You can find him at Matt Freeze. Excuse me. You can find him at Fries Football. I got this.
There we go. You worked.
I don't know if I did the outro, but I got this. I'm doing it live. Please leave us a glowing 5-star review if you love us. We're gonna try. We're honestly trying to do, the tape grinding and the weekly outputs. We're gonna try and get at you weekly every Friday, recording on Thursday nights going forward. So we're really looking forward to the season. I think we're gonna try and hit that schedule going forward. We look forward to Gregg being back next week, and we'll see you after the 49ers game. Goodbye. We love you, and Skol.
Skol Vikings.
Skol, baby.
Another first-round corner wouldn't do us any harm. Oh, another first-round corner wouldn't do us any harm. Oh, another first-round corner wouldn't do us any harm. And we'll all cheer on behind, and we'll score.